this time, I want to turn our meeting over to our program chairman, Eric Jensen, Vice President Eric Jensen, who is going to introduce our program. And I know that this is going to be very, very good. And I am looking forward to it anxiously myself. Eric?
Thank you for the applause. Bob Layton, are you here tonight? I know you're here. Last time I saw you, we were at the airport at the last meeting we had together, joint meeting with your society or your museum out there. I took the video of that. I have your video right here, so you're more than welcome to it, free of charge. And if you need copies or you want me to edit it, we'll be happy to help you any way we can. I work my own electronics. How's that? Hey, great. James Wilkins helped me do that. He invented the computer. No, he didn't. Anyway, this is one of the great things that I get to do is meet with our wonderful speakers, and I insist on it. And he'll tell you that if you want to have a program with me, you've got to come visit me, and we have to do a show of some sort. So, because we're kind of in that age nowadays, and it's fairly easy to do. But the work is always it's difficult in gathering up the materials. But James here, and I'll tell you in just a minute, spent 18 months gathering up materials for this program tonight. So he came in with a stack of them. I said, James, I really didn't mean it. He's got a lot. We have a number of slides here to show you tonight. So, but I wanted to tell you that, and before I sit down, I wanted to tell you that I guess it's next month, and you'll probably mention this, but next month we're going to have a little social, ice cream social, which I like. That's my favorite. We'll tell you where later. But the following month, our little old Carnegie building is right next door to the Christ Episcopal Church, and although they've been trying to buy that building for years for one reason or another, regardless, I go to that church because my wife makes me go. But they have the most beautiful stained glass windows in that church. If you've never been in that church, you need to go. It's Episcopal church, so you have to be careful with all the lightning and everything that goes on in there. But I'm just kidding. But these windows were built in 1918. They were imported from Missouri, and there's like 20 of them in there. If you've never been in there, they're just gorgeous. Well, the choir director walked around for 2 consecutive Sundays and talked about the religious significance of them, the artistic significance of them, the color, the brilliance, the brightness, the biblical, and I took videotape of it. So I videotaped his little talk and walked around, and in 2 months, if you come, and of course it's subject to approval of if somebody else comes forward with a better program, because we're going to watch a videotape of about 45 minutes of this Keith Weber talking about these windows, and you're just going to absolutely love it. He just goes into chronological order of Christ's life, so you'll see the progression from when he was the conception through I don't know much about it. Through resurrection, yeah. I really don't. I went to law school.
We've got a deal.
You're not taking this down, are you? It's not that chemical. Anyway, so it's just great working with our speakers. So if you have anybody that you want to come, I know there's some number of suggestions. Come to me, call me, come visit me. James Wilkins was the 3rd president of the Smith County Historical Society in 1963 and 1964. He was co-creator of the Chronicles of Smith County, Texas, which is a monthly or quarterly magazine that comes out chronicling, talking about the history of our area here. And now in its 40th year of publication. He has researched and spoken on or published material on several ghost towns, the Ku Klux Klan of the 1920s, the Brown Derby, and old shoe restaurants, the Dixie service stations, a Civil War's days hanging in Tyler of 3 Unionists, as well as many, many other topics of Smith County's past. He has served on the Society's Jack T. Greer Memorial Trust Fund Committee since its inception in 1975. For over 18 months, he has researched the Tyler-built Texas Bullet airplane and interviewed the present owners of the existing bullets, as well as flyers, factory workers, and other people involved with that airplane. James is a former public school art teacher, advertising agency art director, and since 1982, the owner of his own advertising art agency and studio in Tyler. He has a bachelor's and master's degree in art education from Stephen F. Austin University and taught an art class at UT Tyler. He is married to Judy Wilkins, a piano teacher and professional musician. It is with great pleasure that I introduce to you our speaker tonight, James Wilkins, and the Texas Bullet Airplane.
I'm really glad you're here tonight. Some of you know about the Texas Bullet, of course. Some of you know about airplanes, of course. Some of you certainly know about Stewart Airport and have seen that. But I'm just putting together a lot of pieces of a puzzle tonight. Local history research to me has always been like a jigsaw puzzle, you know. Finding, taking up pieces and they all kind of fit together. And eventually might have a hole over here, and that might fill up eventually. But it's one of the few things that doesn't have pieces with straight edges, because you never finish the frame of the jigsaw puzzle. You continue to work. And everything that he talked to you that I've done research on, occasionally I still get people giving new information or saying, why didn't you talk to so and so? And I know this program tonight will be the same thing. The picture that's up here is the 3 existing Texas bullets. None of them are below the Mason-Dixon line, as a matter of fact. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Marietta, Georgia, that would be below. But 2 of them are at Lake Elmo, Michigan. And that's what's left of the 6 that were built out there. And 849, as you can see the tail numbers on these, 849, when I first started, was owned by Tom Melby in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And 851, which is the back plane, was owned by Mark Holliday of Lake Elmo, Michigan. And 852 in the foreground is owned by Robert Brown of Marietta, Georgia. And since this photograph appeared in a magazine, and since I started working on this, the 2 bullets that were in Minnesota at Lake Elmo, and both in the same hangar, a storm came through and almost demolished both of them. One of them had not been fully restored. As a matter of fact, when this picture was made, the plane was not flying. The plane in the back, which is 851, it didn't have a motor, and the wings were just kind of put on with C-clamps, I think, for the picture. But Mark Holliday, and I've talked to both these guys. They've been so helpful with giving pictures and information and everything. They love their airplanes. And Mark Holliday called me last week from Michigan and said, I'm going to try to come down to hear you speak. And I said, are you going to come in the Bullet? And he said, well, yeah, because he said I fly all over the country, Florida, Phoenix, and all this stuff. And he was in Tennessee last week. But he called me this afternoon from Dallas. And I don't know if he's arrived yet or not, but he'll be here at this meeting before this is over. And he had to fly commercial, and he flew to Dallas, and then he's on the Eagle over here. And should be here. And we'll go to Phoenix tomorrow and then go on home. I really wanted to see a bullet, a real one after doing so much investigation of it. And maybe someday I will, but he promised me a color photograph taken last week in Tennessee of his bullet flying. And that's always an enjoyable sight to see. I'm going to kind of orient you to where the story happened that I'm going to tell you about. This was in the newsletter, and it was so small you probably couldn't see it, but East Irwin Street is the main street, east and west. I think it's probably the longest street, east and west Irwin, the longest street in town. And as it goes out toward the east, toward what used to be Kilgore, it was the main highway to Kilgore. Out there, the road forks, one goes to Henderson. And if you continue and you pass El Charles Restaurant, number 1, and if you pass where the Starlight Drive-In used to be, there's no trace of that now. There are 2 buildings out there that look like hangars. They have kind of rounded tops. And if you've been here a while, you know that's where KLTV had their studios. But those hangars were built for the first airport that was there. Those 2 buildings, the 2 round top buildings that are connected, were built in the early 40s for an airport out there. The road that I show on the map going north and south, which is now the loop, and the first section of the loop that was built, was a country road that went from the Kilgore Highway to the Henderson Highway. It was a straight line, and that was the first section of the loop. So the loop has the exact place of the county road. Now, when Front Street went through and we had the Front Street extension, it went right through the runways. And then when the new Kilgore Highway was built, it went right across the runways. And the airport had long ceased to exist as an airport. It was through in 1952. But if you passed out there and wondered what those buildings are, and don't they kind of look like hangars for airplanes? That's exactly what they were. This is an aerial taken in 1950s of that same area. You can see the Starlight Drive-In in the background. You can see some planes there on that dirt grass runways and apron. You can see the hangar doors up of the big hangar. And that road in the background, of course, is the county road that is now the loop. So the road you see going across that frame, the building in the background with the 2 rounded tops was a building that GE may have started their plant in. At least they worked on the compressors there, remodeling, revamping compressors. It probably is the same vintage as maybe the Stewart Airport, but I'm not positive about that.
1955 and 56, the train that started their production.
In there, okay, see there, the pilot plant. This now is the factory where the Bullet was built. And the building, looks like a house, was the offices of the manufacturing company, the Texas Bullet offices were in that. There are some private homes and some things in the background that existed there. The people who owned that land, they kind of built the airplane around it. There is a triangular building out there. Doesn't show in either one of these 2 pictures too well, but it's still out there. And for a long time it's painted, I think it's painted green now. And it was a rose storage and wholesaler. That was the maintenance shops for the airport and for the Texas Bullet. And a little triangular building. It's a very strange looking building. It sits kind of back off of the loop now. But it's about to fall in. I mean, it will be torn down in the next year or so. It leaks. The steel holding it up is rusting and so forth. But they could put 3 planes in there and work on it, and they have another bay as a paint bay. So that building and the hangars are the original parts of that project that are still out there. These aerial pictures were shot by Sam Gibbons out of his plane, and Peggy Gibbons, his widow, who loaned a lot of things to me to copy. She lives down on Lake LBJ. Had these in her collection. Well, this is the guy that started it all. And then absolutely the chase for W.E. Stewart's picture has resulted in this one tiny photograph that was in the paper, in the Tyler paper in 1951 when Mr. Stewart and his wife gave the beginning of Stewart Blood Center, W.E. Stewart Blood Center. He also was very active on the board of the medical center and helped to develop that. Mr. Stewart was an incredible man. He had lost 2 fortunes before he came to Tyler in 1936. He had grown up in Cass County at a little place called Bryant's Mill, and his dad had a store and a grist mill, and Mr. Stewart was gifted with money and figures, and when he was 17 years old, he went to work for a bank in Omaha, and when he was 21, he organized his own bank. I've forgotten the Sulphur Springs or somewhere up in the territory. He was very successful in the banking business and made lots of money. He was later very successful. He owned a bank in Henderson. He owned a bank in Overton eventually. He owned 7 or 8 banks in East Texas that he originated himself. Mr. Stewart came to Tyler to open a training center for civilian pilots. He had one in Bryan, he had one in Lafayette, he had about 6 altogether. He came out to this land that we're talking about, bought land, leased land, and put a training center in for pilots in 1942. Then a guy named Russ Feinfrock had started the Tyler Aviation School, and Russ went in with him, and he and Mr. Stewart were partners, and in September of 42, they built the runway, the 2 runways that were out there, and built the hangars and the maintenance shop. So these things date from about the fall of 1942. Mr. Stewart, his obituary in the Tyler paper covered a quarter of a page. You cannot believe the detail of his life and the things that he was active in. He founded the town of Weslaco, W-E-S-L-A-C-O, that's W.E. Stewart Landing Company. He built 4 canal systems in Weslaco to provide water for irrigation. He had been a stockbroker in New York and very successful. He was in Florida for a while. He came to Tyler and operated these schools, and Sam Gibbon had been one of his students at A&M where he went to school. So when Sam came back out of the Army, Sam Gibbons went to work for Mr. Stewart, managing the flying service out there at the field, and eventually trying to sell the Bullet, and eventually he moved his operation after the field closed. He moved it to Poundsfield and bought out Williams Air Service out there and had flying service out there and did charters and took photographs and aerial flying service and so forth. Well, Mr. Stewart closed Stewart Field in June of 1951. Mrs. Leela Stewart, his wife, died in 1952 in February. And in March of 53, Mr. Stewart married Jaquetta Kelly. Now, Mr. Stewart was 76 and she was 47. And he had known her in Overton. She had a florist shop in Overton. And he would buy flowers for business purposes and to carry his wife, who was an invalid. The Stewarts lived at the corner of 4th Street and South College. The house now occupied by Francis Cowan was the Stewart house. It had an elevator or stair climber, elevator, I think, because Miss Stewart was an invalid in a good many of her years and spent her last years in the top floor of that. So Jacketta they married, and they were married 3 years, and Mr. Stewart then died in 1956. The Stewarts had one son, Austin Stewart, who had an oil company in Freeport. And Austin is deceased, but I think he has some children over there. But that's what happened to that only child of the Stewarts. Jacketta lived in the house at the corner of 4th and College. And I guess the strange part of it is that 13 days before Mr. Stewart died, he wrote his will. And this is the most unusual provision in a will I think I've ever read, and I'm going to just read it to you. Section 9. Jacketta is a wonderful person and a lovely wife, and she and I have been very happy in this union, and having a great desire to leave her, not only comfortable and well provided for, but fully protected, and knowing her way of making a good many friends, some of whom could be mercenary friends, and whom Jacketta would never suspect, and being a man myself of long experience and much observation, and knowing the cunning of man and his desire for comfort, and for the things that make him so, I make this specific provision in this will. And it's signed on the condition that if Jacketta should, at any time after my death, become married, all of the properties that I have given to her go to the Stewart bloodline. It kind of ties you down, doesn't it? Now, she did sell the house at corner of 4th and South College and bought one over on West Mockingbird. It also had an elevator in it because Jacketta herself got in really bad shape physically, but she did remarry again. And she had by that time either sold or given her new husband the property. This husband abused her and mistreated her, and she filed for divorce against him and had to go to court to get back boxes of things that her family had had. And in her last days, Jacketta lived in Oklahoma, where she was born and raised, and is buried, brought back to Overton and buried in the cemetery. And I've tried twice and cannot find her grave out there at all, but I assume that it is there. The funeral home record showed that it was. Mr. Stewart was an incredible man, and he left a tremendous heritage. And he loved airplanes, apparently, and he wanted to build an airplane. And so he went to Pennsylvania and found out there was a company up there named the Welch family. It was an old man and a couple of sons, and they built airplanes. When they'd get an order, the boys would come in from the farm, the fields, and they'd put the airplane together, and you bought it. It cost $750 flyaway. $750, called the Welch airplane. And Mr. Stewart somehow got alerted that this business was for sale. He went up there, he bought the rights to the Welch airplane, he bought apparently the jigs and the plans and all of that, brought it to town, built a factory building that I just showed you, where he was going to build an airplane. It was called the Stewart Bluebird. That's it. That's the only one that was ever flew. And it flew. May the 13th, 1951, December of 46, and 2,000 people went out there to watch it fly. Can you imagine in Thailand? Of course, it's built in Thailand. And people are fascinated with the plane, so 2,000 people. I interviewed a couple of people that actually told me they saw it, this plane fly. Apparently, they started the second plane, but he abandoned the project, and it sat there. So here's the field. It's got a flying service on it, and this wonderful factory, custom made to build airplanes in. And The airplane that I'm showing you, I have no idea what happened to it. May or may not exist. It was called the Bluebird because it was painted light blue with orange stripes, orange trim. And it was out of time. You know, there were much better planes already being built after the war market. They were coming along right and left, all different kinds. People had choices of. The test pilot on this flight was Louis Welch. Louis eventually had a car lot in town. I kind of went from one thing to another. This thing would go 90 miles an hour in cruising, landed at less than 40 miles an hour, and this thing sold for $2,000. Now, what would you do with an airplane factory unless somebody came to town that wanted to buy it? And a flim-flam artist kind of a fellow, kind of like an ambulance salesman, kind of like Harold Hill in the music business, came to town. And his name was Pop Johnson. Rufus Somerville Pop Johnson. Pop was an old-time airman. He had worked on airplanes in World War I. He was a barnstormer. He had a welding factory that helped build iron-framed airplanes. He was interested. And he came to town and offered to buy 3 acres and the factory to build his plane, which was going to be his dream plane. And he'd already built several planes in Fort Worth, Dallas area, Hurst. He had a factory close to Meacham Field in Fort Worth. And he came to Tyler and bought from Mr. Stewart and his fellow stockholders. And there were people like S.J. Taylor was one of the stock owners. Mr. Jenny Cove was one of the stock owners. Mostly Mr. Stewart had more than 50% of the stock. And they signed a contract with Pop Johnson to build his plane, his dream plane that he had in his mind, which was an all-aluminum, all-metal plane, single-wing monoplane that was pretty fast. I mean, it was pretty jazzy. And young pilots coming out of World War II, you know, if they had some money, they would love to have one of those. Oops, Eric, how do I go back? Okay. This is Pop Johnson. This is the Texas Bullet that he built, the only one that he built. And it's in the, it appears to be in the hangar, the big hangar. All of those people have come for an open house so that they can go through and see the plane being made. They can ask questions about it. And the Chamber of Commerce loved this. And the leaders of the city loved this because it was industrial leaders, and here was a new industry they had out there. Pop Johnson's plane, before he came to Tyler, was the Swift. And this is the Globe Swift that's illustrated up there. This was not an airplane, though, for a novice pilot, according to the history of the aircraft in Texas. It said its stalling characteristics and its low-speed handling demanded a pilot's full attention. And he built some of these same characteristics into the Texas Bullet because that's the major complaint people have, that a beginner couldn't fly the Texas Bullet. This was the first drawing that Pop Johnson showed of the Bullet. This was the artist rendition. This is what he sold, apparently, people to invest in this plane. This now is a Texas Bullet after it actually got into competition. Actually, this is after Pop Johnson came out, fell out of the picture. Sitting on the wings of that are Dave Johnson's wife. Pop Johnson had 3 sons, all of whom were airline captains. 2 with American and 1 with TWA. Dave Johnson and Odell, and I forgot the other boy's name, but anyway, this is the wife of one on the left, and on the right is Mrs. Bud Miller. Bud Miller was the sales manager for a while. Bud lives out at Granbury, and he and I have talked over the phone to some extent. Dave was, all the boys were executives in this factory, in the company. More promotional pictures. This is out of Pounds Field, but this was taken probably in 1952. I asked Apache Bell to look at this, and she said, "No, I don't recognize any of those people." But, I think somebody probably could identify those.
Looked like 1954, if that's maybe,
54?
if that's the girl I'm thinking about on the far left, but I
Okay.
wouldn't swear.
None of them were identified, Ken, and I never did find this picture in the newspaper. So this is a Texas bullet that was painted blue with a light cream color stripe down it. This is also from the history of aviation in Texas. And this is tail model 848, so you've already seen that. This is the bullet flying with Pop Johnson at the control and his secretary, Dorothy Easton, in the background. And that canister under the bottom of it was Pop Johnson's brainstorm, and it was going to be a jet assist, which means that part of the exhaust was going to be piped down through this canister under there, which was like a big muffler, and somebody said it had a fire plug in it and actually fired and gave it more boost, picking up maybe 2 or 3 more miles per hour. It was only on one plane when they actually started production. The people in charge said, "No, we're not going to put that on there." I have no idea what that big knob is on the top of that plane. It might be I have no idea.
Radio director will come.
A radio compass.
Probably recognized.
And the tail on Johnson's first plane, although it's not down in this picture, retracted. All 3 wheels retracted. And when they actually got into production later on, that was the first thing that went. No more tail wheels. Pop Johnson had developed a technique for retractable tail wheels, and he put it on airplanes in the 30s for $20 a plane. And so he had, he was an idea man in many ways. A very brilliant person. This is another sales picture. This is a young lady, Lois Davis, on the day she made her solo flight in the bullet. Here again, this is Peggy Gibbons' pictures. She sent me her whole scrapbook with all the newspaper ads that connected to the Texas Bullet, of which Sam was the sales manager, of the flying service, which Sam managed. Great pictures. One of the most incredible pictures is a downtown Tyler aerial in the snow. And also the house, the first house they lived in Tyler, which is still there, a rock house at the corner of Donnybrook and Wilma. That rock house is there. That was Sam and Peggy Gibbons' first house with their children. And great photographs of that. They took all around the house and took an aerial view of it, which she sent me. This is another picture that was in a sales folder for the bullet. It's printed in pink and blue, if you can imagine that. And I've got the original over here. It was printed by Story Right in Tyler. Sam Gibbons is standing there. Standing on the wing with Sam is Marcella Curry, and inside is Sue Moore and Peggy Gibbons. Now, and some of those people I simply don't know. Okay. This is a picture of great significance, and especially to one person in this audience. This is when they carried the bullet over to Meacham Field for the CAA test. And the fellow with the cap on at the back is Ted Yarborough, who was the test pilot. The fellow leaning toward the front of the wheel is Bill Messick, who was the inspector. And the guy in the suit standing in front of the plane is Mike Glatnick. And Mike's widow is with us tonight back there. Veer, hold up your hand so they know where you are. I had the privilege of going out and visiting with Mike, I don't know how many times. I'd go out, spend Sunday so alert, but his health degenerated in the time that he passed away in February. Mike built several small planes. I think he built his first one when he was 17, wasn't he, Bill? And he built 4 or 5. As a matter of fact, number 5 is in their garage at this moment. You know, and maybe we'll be sold. Anyway, Mike was very helpful to me. Mike was the centering point for all these people that had written in here. Because anytime I would write somebody, they would say, well, have you talked to Mike Blaney? And I'd write them back and say, yes, you know, I found him too. And they would be people who called him and got his advice and loaned him and borrowed his pictures and borrowed things. And he was so generous with that. And I'm happy to have known him and have gotten to understand better what it was like to work for Pop Johnson, which he did, and then later for the factory. And Mike was the manager of the production factory. And one of the things he gave me a copy of was a big organizational chart showing who was, you know, over everybody. Mike was over, you know, all these other branches, the upholstery shop and the paint shop and the parts and all that kind of stuff. This is an unusual photograph of stress tests that were run in the factory on the bullets. They would weight various parts up and down and see how much weight they would hold. Now, what is fascinating about this picture is that in the upper right corner is the tail of an airplane. Can you see it up there? That's the second Bluebird they started. And I know that's what it is because a guy that flew out there, Tom Simpson, who lives in Phoenix, Arizona, told me about it, and he said, we never knew why they hung it up in the ceiling of the bullet factory, but it was the Bluebird. And so that's it. That's that picture and the one that I showed you, the grainy newspaper picture, at this time were all we found on the bullet. They tested, I have many of the test shots of various parts of it, loading the wings, all the parts of it. There also exists a group of pictures when they did the open house that appeared in the newspaper of the people working on building it. And they were all country people, most of them, that paid, you know, some of them got paid like 60 cents an hour. And I talked to them, it had the people's names, and I called one, you know, who had the same name in the phone book, and sure enough, she was one of the people that went to work out there. They taught them what to do, and they could do it. And she referred me to another fellow. I've talked to 3 or 4 people who worked in the factory at various times. This is when Robert Brown flew his plane to Tyler. And I'm not sure about the date of this. Robert lives in Marietta, and he has the best restored plane at the moment. And they flew it to Tyler, and C.D. Jackson and Mike Blatnick, Mike with the hat on, C.D. with the standing there, both went out and had their pictures made. Vera told me she went out there too. And C.D. Jackson is here tonight. C.D., raise your hand up so they can see you. I'm so glad you're here tonight. All these guys would know stories of Bob Johnson and Sam Gibbons and all those guys. C.D. Jackson went to the airport where he was a tower operator, right, C.D.? But and he retired from that. But he also worked in the maintenance shops. And Sam Gibbons said he could do anything, and I believe it. Well, this is Sam Gibbons. We'll come back to Pop Johnson, and I'll tell you the rest of that story. Sam Gibbons came. He was teaching Russian pilots. He was teaching Egyptian pilots. He was all over the place. And when he finally moved his operation out to Pounds Field, this was a big story that they ran pictures of the planes and all that kind of stuff. Sam was an incredible guy, and in 1980, he came and made a speech just down the street from here at the Baptist Church to the Historical Society. Did any of you remember that speech? Did any of you hear it? Well, we have it on tape. And it's a little reel about that big, and good old Howard Palmer made it, as well as hundreds of others. And I got that tape so I could play back what Sam said. And guys he taught flew in here from Arizona and Oklahoma and parts of Texas, because Sam taught a lot of people to fly. And so Sam's widow also knew how to fly. And, well, she never did get her license. And when I talked to her over the phone, I said, well, did he teach you how to fly? She said, well, there were only 2 people that he couldn't teach to fly. One was me, and the other was Billy Farmer. Now, those of you who know Billy Farmer know that Billy cannot hear. And you have to be able to hear if the instructor is telling you to do things. So Billy made it up until the solo, and he just simply couldn't do that. But Peggy was the other one that he didn't teach how to do. This is an ad. There was GI Bill money, a lot of it, and so they started teaching GIs. They ran lots of ads like this in the newspaper for the Tyler Flying Service. Veterans, eventually, of course, that money ran out. Sam was very active in that. He promoted, he flew that bullet all over the United States, and flew it to Wright-Patman Field, tried to sell it to the Army. He flew it to Atlantic City. He flew it to every Miss America contest, I guess. Would carry the Tyler girls to the Miss Texas contest and so forth. This is a thing that Sam was very interested in, and this was the Air Scouts. And Melvin McCreary, who's in this picture, identified these guys for me, and there are only 2 that he can identify, but I'm just going to go from left to right.
We know those 2.
Okay, will you tell me and I'll fill them in my blanks.
Robert Wilkerson on the left.
Who?
Robert Wilkerson.
Okay.
Bob Glover sitting in the back of Green E, and then the next one is Charles Roach.
Okay.
Thomas Simpson.
Real young looking guy.
And Bob Swader, Bill Swader, then Sam Standing, Jerry Miller, myself, Baron Ray, and
Who did you say?
Joe Ferguson.
Joe Ferguson. Now these guys were just, a lot of them were students, high school students, weren't they?
Yes.
Okay. But Sam took them to heart and would let some of these young kids fly with him. I talked to one guy who said that he'd hang around the hangar, you know, and could hitch rides all over wherever Sam was going. There wasn't anybody, you know, with him. And
Three of that group made professional airline pilot.
how many?
3.
3. Isn't that remarkable? Just this group. This picture was taken in May of 1948. Another thing that Sam promoted were flights of people who owned private planes, and there were a lot of private plane owners in Tyler. This is a flight that they're planning out, and the people are identified in this. Sam, of course, is the one in the white shirt, but coming across from the left, Mrs. Clay Bradshaw, then Mrs. Otis Crow. The one in the dark dress is Mrs. M.W. Chambliss. Somebody asked me about Chambliss today. Then Peggy Gibbons, and then Sam. They planned breakfast flights every Saturday morning. 8, 10 dozen planes. They thought nothing, flying down to Galveston, going for a swim, eating lunch, and flying back. Or flying to Canton, or, you know, wherever they, Shreveport, some other airport, you know, there was great interest in it. And a lot of people, Peggy wrote a column, kind of spasmodic, but she would show a photograph and tell in the plane and tell about people who had their own planes. One of them that she sent me 4 or 5 of those, and one of them was Bob Rogers, who had the Rose Garden Drive-In at the time when he was getting into private flying. Very interesting. Told a lot about planes. Really promoted. There was a news column in the paper of airplane doings. You know, who's going where, and so forth. I want to return now for a moment to Pop Johnson, because this is a continuation of what happened after the Bullet Factory closed down after making the 6 planes. Bob Johnson is the little short man in the middle with the felt hat. I've not seen a picture of him that he didn't have a felt hat on. Even when he was flying the airplane while ago, he had a hat. This plane in the background is not the bullet. It is the Regency rocket. Because after Tyler, and after association with Leon Taylor, who lived in Henderson, then Pop went to Henderson, and they bought the old ice house, and built it, trying to build the Regency rocket, which was Pop's original design. You can tell that it's a bicycle gear, that wheel in the front, kind of tips it off. It's easier to land, much easier to land apparently than the tail draggers they call them. This appears in a book about the Rusk County Airport, and all these people are identified, but I'm just going to identify Pop Johnson, who's got the light-colored suit, and then two of his sons are on the extreme right over there. They were also active in Henderson. They built 14 or 15 planes down there, and of course it fizzled too. Pop, somehow, they got one of the planes and promoted the idea, and this plane, the Sky Gem, is a bullet that's been repainted and was bought by the city of Rexburg, Idaho, because they thought it'd be a great industry to bring to their town, to build an airplane. And so they bought this with painted over it. And they never built a plane, not a one. I corresponded with people in Rexburg who were in the Historical Society, and they had just published the history of the Sky Gem in their magazine. It kind of looks like the Chronicles magazine. Anyway, we swapped some information. He gave me the address and name of the president of the company. It was a big company. I wrote him, and he said, well, I was the president, but in name only. He said, I went back to college and got my doctorate and taught me. He said, I hardly even followed it after that. This plane is now owned by Robert Brown in Marietta, Georgia. This is the best plane that's been restored. And Robert's plane is white with that big, funny green slash over the side. So after Rexburg decided they weren't going to build this anymore, they had an offer from a guy in California named Dick Schutz. And Dick Schutz is in Ojai, California. Ojai. I don't know where. And I wrote him a letter and I said, I'm working on this, and it would be nice to be able to put the finishing touches to what happened to all these planes. So, and he wrote a letter back and sent me this picture. And he said, I'm sorry, but you will be unable to write the final chapter in the bullet story yet. It's presently warm and dry in our shop. Unfortunately, other business interests have absorbed my time. And this is the state of it. People who own bullets and who have loved the bullet thinks it doesn't look like a bullet at all. It's tricycle gear instead of the old bullet shape. And he's done some other changes, and who knows what it's going to be painted when he finally does that. After Henderson, Pop went to Lafayette, Louisiana, and promoted down there these Aerosonic, two different models. One of them sold for $1,350. That's that single engine. And then this was a twin engine, basically the same design. I think this big one would hold 6 people instead of 4. It sold for $20,000. This is when Robert Brown, who owns the plane and is on the left in that striped shirt. These are Sam Gibbons' 3 sons. And they were at a fly-in, I think, in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, where they fly in planes of certain vintages and enjoy seeing them and seeing how people have restored them and so forth. I want to just leave you with a couple of stories about Pop Johnson. People said he was maybe difficult to work with. He got in trouble in Tyler because he lived in the Plaza Hotel and gave them hot checks and told them to hold the checks, and they'd do that, and then finally one day they went and cashed one and it bounced. He had lots of checks that bounced. He wasn't a businessman. He needed lots of money to operate what he was best at, and that's building, designing planes. maybe even sell it. When he got in trouble out there, the deputy sheriff came out to confiscate the plane. Bud Miller was his sales manager, and Bud told me this story. He said, Pop said, go get in that plane and you go fly and hide it somewhere. And he said, I was fixed a taxi out onto the runway, and here came the deputy sheriff, parked his car, jumped up on the wing, grabbed me by my coat lapels, and he said, I just got paid the first check for Pop Johnson, and I'd bought a $25 suit. And he said, I kind of gave the guy a shove, and he fell off the wing, and he tore the lapels right off my new coat, and he took off with the plane and went up to Denton and headed for 2 or 3 days. Bob Johnson didn't collect enough taxes, and the federal government shut him down. And when they auctioned off his property in Tyler, it was bought by Mr. Stewart and his associates. So they were kind of buying back their own company. And it was at that point that they got serious about making the bullet and organized the factory and brought in a whole new team of people from various places, experienced people. Mike Blatnick, for instance, had extensive training and before and after, and with Bell Helicopter and other planes. So they were experienced people, good engineers. But let me just read you. This is a letter that was published in a magazine in 1984 when they ran an article about the Swift airplane that Pop had done. And this is a fellow in Greeley, Colorado, who's responding to that story. And he said Pop's license was number 4714, so he'd been around a while, even then. He was a fantastic pilot, a man who got things done, a fireball. Like so many others of his ilk, he never knew what can't mean. He's just done it. I know he left a bad taste in a great many mouths over his sometimes questionable methods and business dealings. The man was always square with me, right down the line, and his 3 sons were like the brothers I never had. And the gist of all of this was that Pop Johnson was a true character, but he never had enough money to do what he wanted to do. When Pop flew the bullet the first time, the reporter from the Tyler newspaper went out and he wrote an open letter to the Wright boys. Orville and Wilbur would have enjoyed a Tyler test flight. And I thought you might enjoy this one last comment that I'll make about this. It said the bullet was built right here in Tyler by a fellow named Johnson, Pop Johnson, they called him, about 60, white-haired. He knows airplanes like the back of his hand. He ought to. He's built enough of them. I could tell you how big the bullet was, how fast it would go. I've got spec sheets on it if you want to read that. I've got Sam Gibbons' speech that he made in 1980 when he came before us. A lot of the people that he talked about and that Sam knew are gone, but we still have some around, and I'm glad, that they're here, or that somebody. Every time you give a speech, somebody comes to you later or calls you on the phone and says, "What about so and so?" And I know that's going to happen.
I'm a stockholder in Johnson's Corporation.
Okay.
I knew him.
You did? What's your name?
My name is Jack Watson.
Oh, Jack. Okay.
Was not into flying. Became a friend of my mother. I wrote in that job. I got a flight. Showed me that brochure you got up. I've got one at home somewhere.
Do you?
And unbeknownst to me, we were from a working family. We lived in North Tyler. My mother worked at Sledge Manufacturing Company and reared me. I didn't know she had invested in it, Doesn't sound like a lot of money now, but it was then. Well, he talked to me and I bought stock in it. He was smooth. He was.
Are we talking about Mr. Johnson or
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, Johnson.
Yeah.
Pop Johnson.
Pop Johnson, by
But
the way.
I'll say one thing he did. I'm retired from Shell Oil Company. I was a young guy then, just starting, no money. I told him I needed a car. Right after the war, you couldn't buy a car. You had to be a business or priority. He said, don't worry about it. Looking back, it frightens me. But he got me a new Chevrolet. Early, it would have taken me 3 years to get one. I'm 21 years old. It was bought for the aircraft companies.
Well,
He
the
did
one
what
person over and over is somebody needs to write a book about Pop Johnson. And he's mentioned, of course, in a lot of books.
James, ask how many worked on the Texas bullet is here tonight.
All right, is there anybody, raise your hand if you worked on the Texas bullet. One in the back.
One back here, I'll see you at the walk. They know one another.
Yeah, I came from New Orleans in 1949. First job that I went on was Pop Johnson over there, fulfilling the bullets. I worked in the forming ribs called the fuselage and so forth.
Right. He wrecked that prototype 2 different times, ground loop once and all it did. The other time he just rolled it up, and we fixed that up 2 times.
That's Richard Thetford, who lives out at Edom, and I went out to his house, and he's nice and certified and coffee to him.
I'd like to mention that I never did work for Pop Johnson, but I was offered a job by him. He found out that I was an aeronautical engineer out of A&M. Right after he came here, and he offered me a job. The only problem was I had a good job, and I didn't want to. He acted a little flaky to me. I got to know him. He did a lot of business with us. We were in the spy business, sold him a lot of material for his factory. But I think the guy was a genius that just didn't care too much about the business end of the thing.
Yeah, he needed a business manager.
He did. He needed a business manager, but the man I think was a genius, and I think he was a good engineer.
Well, you know, Bob, they picked the wrong time to start the bullet in Tyler. It was just, the market was crowded with planes of that type, a lot of them better, you know, although the bullet was, you know, you would think it would still sell. Sam said he had lots of contracts. They weren't able to sell it to the government. They were going to try to sell it to the government as a trainer, and they weren't able to do that. I want to say thank you to some people besides Bob Brown and Mark Holliday and Tom Melby, who were so nice, let me use their material. And Vera and Mike Blatnick meant a lot to me. I'm so glad that Vera got to come tonight. And Peggy Gibbons, that lives at Sunrise Beach, and her son Joe, who lives up in New England. And Richard Thetford from Edom, of course, appreciate that. And the Millers out from Granbury, and Thomas Simpson, who sent me lots of stuff from Phoenix. It's not good health, but would have loved to come. R.L. Jacobs from Tyler that I interviewed that worked there, and Pat LeBlanc, who lives down at White House. I thank them. Jerry Bartas is here from Henderson, shared stuff. And Fred Powell, who got this great place for us. I thank you, Fred. And Eric, thank you for making me do this picture. Because I would have been him-hawing around up here, probably was anyway. But thank you very much. Lowell Carey and Mrs. Lewis Williams both worked at the factory and talked to me over the phone, and we're very grateful. And every Taylor and the Tyler newspapers have been so helpful to us. I cannot tell you the number of people that stopped me in church yesterday, you know, and said, well, you know, I'm going to make a speech on this airplane, you know, people I didn't even know, because they read the front page of the Tyler paper, especially Everett's column. So I'm so happy that they did that, and I'm glad you were here. It means a lot to me, but it will mean a lot to these people who have a connection to the bullet, that people are still interested in. And thank you very much for coming here tonight.
Thank you, James Wilkins. James, what is your next project? I know you probably got something going on here. I wanted to tell you, I built this airplane back here in 1988, so doesn't look like, to me it looks a little bit like the bullet. It's an aerobatic airplane. It's supposed to fly as good upside down as it does right side up. And it looked like the bullet to me, so I brought it tonight for y'all to see. It's a French-made, it's called a Dalatel, and it's one of those planes that they fly at the air shows in Europe. Gravity, I'll tell you, it's very efficient, isn't it? I just never could get over this being scared of gravity. I don't know. But while you all were listening to James, I had a little Bible lesson in the back with fine wife. And the word I was looking for earlier was ascension. Can you all say ascension? Well, I couldn't. Anyway, that's the word I was looking for earlier, so that's after the resurrection. So I'll hand it back over to the President, Ms. McNamara.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Eric, for all you've done. And thank all of you who have come. I also want to thank our wonderful hostesses for the refreshments they have provided for us. And we are planning for the June meeting to be our usual ice cream social. You will be notified of the place, and we hope all of you can come again. I believe Wanda Barber has an announcement that she wishes to make at this time.
Hello there. Just wanted to remind you that HAM, the Historic Aviation Memorial Museum out at Poundsville, will be having another fly-in this summer. This time we will be doing it in June the 9th instead of August, like last year when it was so hot. Also, we will be doing this in connection with the Special Olympics. And Bob and his wife just happen to have their briefcase. If anybody would like to become a member, they have some membership forms with them tonight. And then the Young Eagles Ground School, we give the free airplane rides to the kids 8 to 17. And it takes money to buy the fuel to send the kids up because this is done for free. They take a small ground school and then they do a free flight by the EEA, the Experimental Aircraft Association. It's one of their programs called the Young Eagles Program. So if any of you would like to donate to that cause, you can see Bob and his wife over there, or me up here at the front. And because it does take money to buy the fuel to send the kids up, we'd like for all of you to come to the fly-in, June 9th.
Thank you, Wanda. Are there any other announcements at this time? Yes?
I'm with the Tyler Modelers Association. We fly radio-controlled airplanes, and this, in 2 weeks, the 12th of this month, out at what used to be North Park, we're going to have what's called a big bird flying. Airplanes with 7 and 8 foot wingspans, and they're antique, World War I, World War II, and fast and slow. And we invite all of you who like aviation to come out. Starts about 10 in the morning. We'll have refreshments, and we'd love to have you come out.
Where is that going to be?
It's at North Park, what used to be right across the old driver's license department that fell in the ground. Right straight across the street. And you'll see, there'll be signs out there. And come by, you'll have a lot of fun. It's a lot of enjoyment. It's good family fun.
Give me the date again, please.
May the 12th.
No charge.
There's no charge, plenty of parking. Right where the new Smith County Sheriff's Training Building is, if you know where that is.
On Sunday, May the 20th at 4 p.m., Marvin Methodist Church is going to dedicate the marker listing the church properties on the National Register of Historic Places. So you're all invited to come for that unveiling of the marker.
Thank you, Ellen. Did I see another hand? Well,
Mary Jean, I don't mind, but let's pray especially for Max Freeman and his wife. I don't mind serving, but I prefer the ladies to do it. We appreciate y'all cooperating tonight. She's been in the hospital, she's recovering. Let's pray for her recovery so she can be with you.
thank you. Are there any further announcements? If not, I'll declare this meeting duly adjourned until our next festive meeting